Speaking of Lily, have you seen Little Witch Academia? I've only seen the first 8 episodes, I think, and I like it a lot. I just never got around to watching more. We should do that as like a watch along or something. Can I super chat you to watch Lily's video about Little Witch Academia? Anyway, sure, go for it. I like being angry. Let's get ready. Is it the glass of water one? Is that what I'm looking for?
Give me money, give me money, give me money,
Jesus
give me money.
Christ. That's a pretty funny way to do the give me money segment of your video, I gotta admit. Very violent. I appreciate the violence. I hate this song though. Actually, it kind of sucked me back in time in my brain because I had a Sega Pico as a kid when I was like 2.
So I have a question for you guys. When I was covering Little Witch Academia on In a Minute, did you ever notice that when the show was being funny, it was great, but the parts where the show gets really dull and uninteresting are where it tries to be action? I hope you did, because this entire video was written with the assumption that the viewer saw this happening. So as I said early on, I was...
Is she saying that she's writing this video from the perspective of assuming that I have watched her entire reaction series to this show? Well, I haven't, so...
already aware of the fact that Little Witch Academia goes completely off the rails in the second half and accepted that when I went in, but on reflection that was still foolishly optimistic of me. I mistakenly assumed that it would do the usual 2010 Cerebus syndrome of pretending it had something to say about something vaguely related to social issues, trying to sound progressive, and, in Steven Universe's case, accidentally doing a U-turn halfway through. That's not to say that Little Witch Macadamia Nut was good. Quite frankly, it was mediocre right from the start. What grabbed my attention was that in the first few episodes it seemed to be completely devoid of all the usual stock anime tropes that began and subsequently stopped being interesting in Sailor Moon. There was no grand evil plan, there was...
So Lily Orchard has only seen like 10 anime, going by that whole list of like organizing every anime she's seen. There are tens of thousands of anime. Most of them are nothing like Sailor Moon in any way, shape, or form. So to be going into anime with the assumption that it's all going to be doing a Sailor Moon just because like you saw Utena, which is literally from the same team as Sailor Moon, made immediately afterwards, and like maybe a couple other magical girl shows that took influence from Sailor Moon, and now you're like, this is what anime is. I understand why all of the anime that comes into your purview might feel like Sailor Moon because you're not investigating anime beyond like what's popular with trans girls.
No underage girls in fetish outfits. There was no prophecy. Each episode was a self-contained story about being at Hogwarts and about some idiot kid who wants to meet her favorite celebrity. Unfortunately, the only one of these tropes that stayed away was the underage girls in fetish outfits, which is still an improvement because perv pandering is the #1 reason that people with self-respect and dignity don't like Japanese cartoons to begin with.
I do agree with that. I will say that is true. I personally am not as averse to the perv pandering as many other people, but I am also, yeah, can you just keep it to the shows that are for that? You know, like can we just keep the porn in the porn, and like, unless you're going to really say something about sex. No, it's definitely not a problem in Little Witch Academia. She is saying it's not a problem in Little Witch Academia. She's saying this is the only good thing about the show is that it doesn't have...
Unfortunately, the only one of these tropes that stayed away was the underage girls in fetish outfits, which is still an improvement because perv pandering is the #1 reason that people with self-respect and dignity don't like Japanese cartoons to begin with. All the other shit, though, oh boy, does that start piling in. Magical energy crisis, world trees, 7 words you can't say on radio or TV, blah-de, 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 blah. It's all the same usual boring...
Do they do a 7 words you can't say on TV, like, joke in this show or something? I don't get what she meant by that. I get that there's a magical energy crisis. That's kind of what the show is setting up for from the very beginning. No idea what she meant about the 7 words thing.
Crap, augmented by the fact that the cast changes from 1 boring fuckhead and her 2 funny friends to 1 boring fuckhead and 3 other boring fuckheads. That's actually the part that annoys me the most.
I don't really get calling her a fuckhead. That feels like something you really gotta, like, if you're just gonna be like, this character's a fuckhead, I'm like, okay, what did she do? Like, how did she hurt you? What? I don't remember her being a fuckhead. She's like a, I don't know, an average 14-year-old. She's just like a kid. A fuckhead? A boring fuckhead? That's so intense.
Oh, the most entertaining characters in the show are actually Lotte and Susie, and they get completely shafted in favor of the 2 teachers who can't get a sentence out without delays, and Sunset Shimmer's a Lowland form. Honestly, who decided that less Susie was a good idea? And please tell me they got fired over it. But what makes this different from the other shows is the responses I got. You see, when a show completely shits the bed and starts abandoning the concept of fun, the explanation I usually get is that this is really good because it's being more mature and proving that cartoons aren't only...
I kind of agree with her on this, and I haven't seen the second half of Little Witch Academia. I know a lot of people don't like it. Like, this is not an unpopular take on the second half of this show, from what I've heard. It's very divisive. Same goes for Steven Universe when it starts getting serious, and personally, I've only seen the first season of Steven Universe, so I never saw it get, like, as serious as it does. But even having, like, watched it in the beginning, I was always pretty divided. But I also feel like these shows are meant to be serious for children. Like, that's the point. It's meant to be like you as a kid are watching this fun show and then it starts to get more serious and it has more impact, you know? And I remember shows like that as a kid. Obviously, Sailor Moon is an example. Codename Kids Next Door would be a great example for me, where, like, you know, it was episodic. It's just like a fun time. And then it starts to have this ongoing background narrative and, like, further consequences for actions. And, like, it never got as serious as, like, Steven Universe does or Adventure Time does, but it gave it, like, a sense of gravity where you're like, oh shit, this was just fun and games and now it's like serious business, you know? It felt cool as a kid to watch a show do that. I don't think it's supposed to hit the same way as an adult.
For kids, because they superficially pay nod to themes that these same people will be screaming blue bloody murder about if they dared approach it directly. That's always been the irony of, say, Star vs. the Forces of Evil. The show's latest seasons have been pushing a story about privilege and racial prejudice, but they went to another dimension to do that despite Star already living with an Hispanic family in the United States. Unfortunately, if they had stayed with a relevant and direct example to tell the exact same story, the people claiming it to be a really smart show about prejudice would be pitching a fucking shit fit and claiming they're forcing in a political agenda. But Little Witch Academia...
So I don't necessarily disagree with what she's saying there, but I don't see it as necessarily a problem. I mean, it's a problem with society. Part of what makes fiction work and makes it transcend is the non-specificity that makes it applicable to everybody. I've always argued in favor of stuff that is hyper-specific because I find it interesting, but it does require way more effort on the part of a viewer. And most people are not spending their lives, you know, like, indulgently learning about media. Most people have other shit going on. So I think it is partially the job of media to be indirect enough that it connects to experiences that aren't literally yours. And it's not to say that being more specific can't be better, but for especially children, where, like, children don't even really understand the specifics of their own situation that well, the metaphors are always going to hit harder.
It was different because the excuses I got was that it was better that the series got more into its plot because high stakes action and flashy battles is what Trigger does best. No, it's not. They're terrible at action scenes. Almost all the action scenes in their shows are slow, floaty special effects blowouts that barely qualify as action scenes. Mind you, this isn't unique to Trigger. No animated TV series does action scenes well because the budget...
Again, this is, like, speaking from a place of ignorance of, like, I have not seen that much animation. There's plenty of shows that specialize in just doing action well. You know, The God of High School, amazing action scenes. And it's mostly action scenes. The stuff in between the action scenes, I don't fucking care about. The action scenes, incredible. Fucking Baki the Grappler, you know, it's every movement has meaning or incident. There's plenty of action cartoons that do it, and it's not just a spectacle for the sake of itself. It's magic. It's supposed to be floaty. Like, what do you mean?
Budget for that level of animation and choreography just isn't there. I think the Star Wars cartoons demonstrate this the best. In both Clone Wars cartoons and Rebels, the lightsaber fights tend to be really sticky as characters seem to jump from clash to clash. So you get the...
Yeah, see, I agree. I think that looks ugly with that stickiness.
This strange feeling of starting and stopping. There's a bigger emphasis on wide movements and a sense that the characters are just flailing at each other. Basically, they're more focused on where the lightsaber blades end up rather than how they get there. By contrast, the films have a much smoother approach to fight scenes as, with the exception of rare occasions, the blades themselves never stay locked for a very long time. The times they do means they have more impact and tend to be focused on a battle of raw strength. And at all other times, the two locked in battle are very quickly moving from strike to strike, and that's what a sword fight between two people who can both predict the immediate future is supposed to look like. So you get a changing rhythm as the fight speeds up, slows down, enters downtime, speeds back up again, and so on. By the way, the trailers for the Old Republic have this down to an exact science because they're shorter and have a bigger budget. This is what a flashy battle looks like. It really comes down to budget, and that's what kneecaps Trigger more than anything.
It's not about throwing more money at the problem. It's what you're doing with the money. You can make it dynamic with stick figures. There's only so many people people who can do anything well. You can't just like have more money and therefore have all of those people. It's not that simple.
Else, because like most Japanese animation studios, they have a budget of basically nothing, and as a result, their action scenes quickly fall into a few large-scale magic spells or a few really wide strikes.
This looks awesome.
And that's about it. That's not really
No, that looked fucking awesome. What are you talking about? This was supposed to be an example of a bad
It really comes down to
fight?
budget, and that's what kneecaps trigger more than anything else, because like most Japanese...
This is literally cooler than any of those Star Wars fights that were just shown immediately. Look at the facial expressions.
It really comes down...
Look at that guy who's just like, you
the
know,
budget, and that's what kneecaps trigger more than anything else, because
Look at
like
the fucking desperation, the rage, the changing, shifting emotions, defense, anger, intensity. Oh God, it's coming from my other side. I have to wince. This guy, more desperate, can't believe that his strikes aren't connecting, getting angrier, trying to really force it.
Budget of basically nothing, and as a result,
that movement, bam, it's so fast but so high impact.
Their action scenes quickly fall into a few large-scale magic spells or a few really
fucking
wide...
Whoa, what the fuck is this crazy spin kick? This is fucking sick.
Strikes, and that's about it. That's not really anybody's fault, but it goes to show why action cartoons fell out of favor as the mainstream in recent years in favor of slice of life.
And that's also just not true. Action has always been number one. Action always will be number one. The number one anime have been Jujutsu Kaisen in reverse order. Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. All action shows, first and foremost. All shows known for their incredible action sequences. Actually, I would even go so far as to say revolutionary action animation that everyone has copied since.
Easier to animate and it'll age better. Drama and action generally don't mesh well with Japanese cartoons because the low budget animation means that there's a big focus on jumping quickly from one key
it's not the budget
frame to the next, long hangs on a single shot, panning a shot over one frame, and lip syncing. What the fuck is that? But I'd argue that there's one genre that
lip syncing sucks. Lip syncing makes it look worse. Fuck the lip syncing.
Trigger is not only especially good at, but that most Japanese cartoons have always been good at. Pornography!
Who's that? Why are they drawn different?
Comedy. You see, the stilted and jump cut heavy animation style of most Japanese cartoons is silly by nature, and thus lends itself really well to absurdity and thus to comedy. This is a big reason why the most well-remembered shows of the early 2000s emulated it so much, despite the fact that they didn't have to because they had a real budget. Comedy is built almost entirely around good timing, and the fast cuts and missing frames serves that really well. And Little Witch Androgyny was no different. The best
yeah, the DC shows clearly had more money behind them, and they all went for smoother animation, you know, with more frames in it than you would typically get from anime. But do I think it looked better? No, I think it looked worse.
Episode of the entire damn show was one that took full advantage of all of this for the biggest payoff. And this is the reason why Susie was the best character they had, because her dry wit was only complemented by the way
Also, I would bet this show, just because animation is more expensive than it used to be, could easily have been as expensive to make as Teen Titans for at least a season.
Everything moves. Constance is another character who really shines in this regard, as because she's nonverbal, everything about her has to be communicated through animation alone. There's one scene in Stand Ship Takeoff where Akko looks at what she's drawing, trips, and you get a still shot of her mid-fall, and then a still shot of Constance's deadpan face like she's screaming internally. This is the best single shot in the entire show, and it's only 5 frames. The shot immediately afterward is a 15-second montage of Akko's...
I mean, it's a great shot, and you are explaining why the comedy works in this show so well. I just disagree with the overall premise that, like, other aspects are worse. I think the show just looks amazing, like 100% of the time.
Terrible excuses for help that are once again all communicated in only single still images, or even then a few frames of animation. Very cheap to make, very easy to animate, very, very, very funny. The dramatic moments are often ruined by this, such as when Shiny Charmeleon and Kroiki are arguing and the tension of the whole scene is made unbearably cheesy due to the fact that Japanese animation still hasn't resolved its messy breakup with lip syncing.
Maybe I'd have to hear the voice acting in that scene. Like, sometimes a bad lip sync and voiceover can be distracting.
Deliberately write these action scenes with a tiny animation budget in mind, and that's where the problems start. It isn't just about the fighting, it also has to be a scene. One of the best fight scenes in history is the fight between Will Turner and Jack Sparrow.
This is so funny as an example to me, because to me it is almost legendary that Roger Ebert reviewed, I think it was maybe not the first one, this might be from the first movie. He, in his review of Pirates 2, he was criticizing the way that there's just so many over-the-top ridiculous scenes of swords flailing around and like nobody really, you know, even fighting one another, and gave as a counter example the movie Rob Roy, which Ebert said had just like the greatest sword fight he'd ever seen in a movie. So I went and I watched that movie, and the ending sword fight is fucking incredible because it looks like they're really sword fighting. In Pirates, it tends to just be like 15 minutes of cling, 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 all over the place. Star Wars has the mild justification of the, oh yeah, well, they can both somewhat predict the future. So of course they're aiming for one another's lightsabers as opposed to looking like they would ever actually land a hit on one another.
In the first Pirates movie, because it serves as an establishment of their character through very little dialogue and a lot of action. From fighting around the forge to being sent up to the rafters to the ultimate win card of the fact that for all of Will's practice, Jack is a cheater, so he wins.
See, I feel like you're explaining why this is a good scene and not necessarily a good fight. The argument here being, oh, it can't just be a fight, it has to also be a scene. It's like, well, it has to also be a fight. Do I really think either one of these two is going to get hurt in this scene? Not even slightly.
This isn't a very flashy action scene, but it's a meaty action scene. Is there any scene in Little Witch Atlantica that does that? No, there isn't. There's a lot of Dragon Ball Z penis extension beams, particularly that freaking bow, but nothing really substantial. Do you know what Little Witch Macro...
That did not look like a Kamehameha in any way. Penis extension beams? Really? We're going that far? Every energy blast is now a cum blast? All right.
Arena has in spades, though?
Scouring the world for my beloved poisonous mushrooms will be a breeze with my...
Oof. English dub. Oof. Oof. Sushi in Japanese is like iconic.
Come on, get back here!
I like the cartoon sound effect. Why is she playing like 20 fucking clips in a row?
What's this? It looks cool!
She's like every single moment that she liked in the whole show or something.
This show is extremely funny when it wants to be, and it frustrates me that despite being
most of those scenes didn't feel funny out of context because I didn't know what was going on. That was not a good way to prove that the show is funny sometimes. It was just frustrating. I was like, why are you showing me so many goddamn clips?
Funniest people in the global animation industry, Trigger continues chasing action and drama. Hell, the fact that the main character is profoundly fucking stupid and never changes from that would be a great character trait in comedy rather than where Akko currently is, which is a gigantic pain in the ass. I've noticed this trend across Japanese cartoons for over a decade now. Of the two Japanese cartoons I watched as a kid, Hamtaro aged beautifully and it's still a lot of fun to watch, while Cardcaptors aged like milk.
Cardcaptors aged like milk? What are you talking about? Maybe she means the dub for Cardcaptor. That's true. If she only watches dubs, it would be really hard to go back to the Cardcaptor dub. I could see having a problem with that and thinking that Hamtaro holds up better because I'm sure that dub is fine.
The only Japanese cartoon of the modern era I have even been remotely interested in is a slice of life cartoon about a precious babu being a precious babu and none of the industry's other bullshit. But it's not localized in English, which means I'm basically shit out of luck. Japanese animation has never done adventure stories well because they don't have the resources to actually display it. A show like Avatar would have never happened in Japan because the industry has very low budgets and too insular an audience. It had to be made with Nickelodeon's money behind it, and even then it still had to cut corners like it was crunch time at the Circle Factory. Action is so resource intensive that a region whose animation industry is surviving on starvation diets is just not going to be able to do it unless...
I don't know what she wants from an action scene other than that it be like a scene apart from being an action scene or like have implications about the story. I want an action scene to be like cool looking shit happening. Anime does that just so much better. I mean, I don't know how old this video is, but like nowadays, Western media has figured out how to copy anime, where we've got the Spider-Verse movies, we've got the Puss in Boots sequel, we've got the Mutant Mayhem movie. Like all of these have figured out what anime is doing to look so cool and are copying it. And it's really Trigger at the forefront of this. Like Trigger is the studio the whole world has been trying to rip off. Everyone's been trying to be Imaishi and Yoshinari. They toured the world teaching people how to do their animation techniques. Yutaka Nakamura, Utapan, is the most influential action animator, period.
They get funding elsewhere. But comedy is not only something that Japanese cartoons have always been very good at, It suits their shoestring budget animation styles perfectly. A long-standing question people ask me is why I hate Japanese cartoons, and this is why. The things they're actually good at are the things they do very rarely, and if you don't want to watch another carbon copy of Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball, then you're not going to have a good time. And because I'm not a pathetic sack of
Sailor Moon, there's more Dragon Ball than Sailor Moon, but there's not that much Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, guys. Plenty of anime is not like this. Look a little harder. Watch my videos, Lily. I've got so many recommendation videos. Tell me what type of anime you're looking for. What would you actually like? Akage no An, Anne of Green Gables. Go watch Anne of Green... Lily Orchard. I personally challenge you to watch Anne of Green Gables. I haven't even seen it. Make a video I want to watch about it. You'll love it. I promise. You'll make a video about how great Anne of Green Gables is, and then I'll be able to be like, wow, Lily Orchard did something great.
Human shit, the aggressive perv pandering in this medium only ever turned me off of it as I got older. I hear a lot of anime YouTubers talk about saving their favorite medium. Even diehard fans admit that they're holding on by a thread and are trying to find some way to revive it. A great place to start would be junking the perpetual money sinks that only appeal to a very tiny minority of hardcore fans. Maybe stop trying to convince pathetic sad sacks to hyper-consume expensive DVD packs with creepily misogynistic fetish fuel. Just buckle down, make a really good comedy series, release it in North America, and revel in the money you'd make from a funny cartoon and the fresh blood into your audience. That's basically what Crunchyroll is trying to do, suck in a new batch of viewers to generate more subscription money from people
that really did not work.
who previously avoided their service because it only supplied terrible perv pandering garbage that nobody actually wanted to watch.
It's not true.
That was ultimately the problem with RWBY. It was so in love with its tropes and cliches that it never stopped to think about if those tropes
There's a lot more wrong with RWBY, but that's for another day.
cliches were actually good, aside from just generally looking like shit. And that's the response I usually get when I complain about this stuff, especially in response to the Korra video. People tell me, oh, that's a common thing in anime. I know this is hard to grasp, but telling me that I'm right not just about a few shows, but about an entire medium is not the smart rebuttal you think it is.
You are very wrong about anime, but you're not all the way wrong about anime. I do think that anime's reputation for fetishism is the biggest thing holding it back.